Some loves are never truly lost, they just go underground, waiting like seeds in winter soil for the right moment to bloom again. Gabriel Smith thought he'd buried his first love 32 years ago when he left Millbrook, Georgia with a broken heart and college acceptance letter. But when he walked into his high school reunion and saw Jamila Williams across that crowded room, time collapsed like a house of cards, and every defense he'd built came crashing down. The Millbrook High School gymnasium had been transformed with twinkling string lights and deep burgundy tablecloths, but Gabriel barely noticed the decorations. He'd come reluctantly, dragged back to his hometown by his sister's insistence that Eleanor needed to connect with her roots. His 16-year-old daughter had been spiraling since her mother's death 2 years ago, and Gabriel felt helpless watching her drift further away from him each day. He was scanning the crowd for familiar faces when it happened. Time didn't just slow, it stopped completely. There, near the far wall, standing beneath a cascade of warm lights, was Jamila Williams. She wore a midnight blue dress that made her rich brown skin seem to glow from within, and when she threw back her head and laughed at something her companion said, the sound hit Gabriel like a physical blow. 32 years vanished in an instant. Suddenly he was 18 again, watching the girl he loved more than his own life walk away from him forever. His breath caught in his throat, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. She was more beautiful now than she'd been at 17, life had given her an elegance, a confidence that took his breath away. As if sensing his stare, Jamila's dark eyes found his across the crowded room. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, neither moved. Her lips parted slightly in surprise, her graceful hand frozen halfway to her throat. The years between them seemed to shimmer and dissolve, leaving only the truth that had never changed: they belonged to each other. Gabriel felt his feet moving before his mind caught up, threading through clusters of classmates he barely saw. His focus had narrowed to just her, the way her chest rose and fell with quickened breathing, how her fingers trembled slightly as she set down her wine glass, the way her eyes never left his face as he approached. Jamila. Her name fell from his lips like a prayer he'd been holding for 3 decades. Gabriel. The way she said his name, soft, wondering, with just a hint of the girl she used to be, nearly undid him completely. They stood there for a moment that stretched like eternity, drinking each other in. She was still tall and graceful, but there was a strength in her posture now that spoke of battles fought and won. Silver threads caught the light in her dark hair, and tiny lines around her eyes spoke of laughter and sorrow in equal measure. She was stunning in a way that made his teenage memories seem pale and inadequate. "You look..." Gabriel started, then stopped, overwhelmed by the inadequacy of words. "Different," Jamila finished with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We both do." "I was going to say magnificent," Gabriel said honestly, watching color bloom across her cheekbones. The music shifted to something slow and familiar, their song from senior prom, played by the same band that had provided the soundtrack to their young love. Without thinking, Gabriel extended his hand. "Dance with me." Jamila hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. The contact sent electricity racing up Gabriel's arm, and from the way her breath hitched, he knew she felt it too. Leading her to the dance floor, Gabriel was acutely aware of every place their bodies touched, his palm against the small of her back, her fingers intertwined with his, the whisper of her dress against his legs. When he pulled her close, she fit against him as perfectly as she had 32 years ago. Her head tilted back to look at him, and Gabriel lost himself in those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams for decades. "I can't believe you're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "I almost didn't come," Gabriel admitted, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hand. "Eleanor, my daughter, she's been having a hard time since her mother died. My sister thought coming home might help somehow." Something flickered across Jamila's face, pain, understanding, something deeper he couldn't quite read. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "Marriage, it suited you?" Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, considering how to answer honestly without betraying the memory of his late wife. Helen was a good woman. A good mother. She deserved better than a husband who could never give her his whole heart. Jamila's step faltered slightly. Gabriel. I tried, he continued, needing her to understand. I really tried to love her the way she deserved. But you can't make yourself feel something that isn't there, can you? You can't manufacture the kind of love that sets your soul on fire. They moved together in silence for a moment, lost in the music and the weight of unspoken words. Gabriel caught the subtle scent of jasmine that still clung to her skin, and it was like stepping back in time. What about you? He asked finally. Did you ever? I was engaged once, Jamila said, her voice carefully neutral. It didn't work out. Why not? She looked up at him then, and Gabriel saw a lifetime of carefully guarded pain in her eyes. Because he wasn't you. The simple honesty of her words hit Gabriel like a lightning strike. Without thinking, he pulled her closer, until there was barely a breath of space between them. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his chest, could see the pulse fluttering at the base of her throat. Jamila, he whispered, her name a confession and a question all at once. Before either could say anything more, the song ended and the spell was broken by the cheerful voice of their former class president taking the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for the class of 1992. The applause crashed over them like a wave, and Gabriel and Jamila stepped apart, both breathing harder than the gentle dancing warranted. The air between them crackled with 32 years of unfinished business. I need some air, Jamila said, pressing a hand to her flushed cheek. Me too, Gabriel agreed, following her toward the exit. They stepped out into the warm Georgia evening, the sounds of the reunion fading behind them. Without discussion, they began walking down the familiar streets of their childhood, past the houses where they'd grown up, toward the place that had been theirs alone. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. The night air was thick with humidity and the scent of honeysuckle, wrapping around them like a familiar embrace. They walked in comfortable silence at first, their footsteps echoing on the quiet sidewalks. Gabriel stole glances at Jamila as they moved, still struggling to believe she was really there, really walking beside him again. Tell me about your life, Gabriel said finally as they paused at a street corner where they'd once carved their initials into the stop sign. The letters were still there, faded but visible in the streetlight. I mean, I know you're successful. Maya keeps everyone updated through the town newsletter. Interior design, right? Jamila smiled, a real smile this time that reached her eyes. You read the Millbrook Gazette? My sister sends it to me, Gabriel admitted, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. And yes, maybe I look for news about certain people. I have my own firm in Savannah, Jamila said, her voice taking on a note of pride. Residential and commercial design. I specialize in historic renovations, bringing old spaces back to life while honoring their history. That sounds perfect for you, Gabriel said, meaning it. You always saw beauty in broken things. They'd reached Millbrook Creek, the narrow waterway that wound through the heart of town. Their old spot was still there, a weathered wooden bench beneath a massive oak tree whose roots dipped into the water. Without discussion, they settled onto the bench, careful to maintain a safe distance between them. What about you? Jamila asked. Architecture, wasn't it? Did you design those soaring buildings you used to sketch for me? Gabriel nodded, surprised she remembered. I have my own firm in Atlanta. Mostly commercial work, some residential. I built everything I thought I wanted. But? Jamila pressed, hearing something in his voice. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, listening to the gentle gurgle of water over stones. But I never felt fully alive again after I left here. After I left you. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Jamila turned to face him fully, moonlight catching the silver in her hair. Gabriel, why did you really leave? I mean, I know about college, about the scholarship, but, we had plans. We were going to figure it out together, remember? Find a way to make it work. Gabriel felt the old guilt rise in his throat like bile. This was the conversation he'd been running from for 32 years. I was 18 and terrified, he said finally. Terrified that if I stayed, if I turned down the scholarship, I'd end up like my father, stuck in a job I hated, unable to provide for my family the way they deserved. Terrified that I'd drag you down with me if I failed. So you made the choice for both of us, Jamila said quietly, but without accusation. I was young and stupid and scared, Gabriel said, his voice rough with emotion. I thought if I loved you enough to let you go, you'd find someone better. Someone who could give you the world. Jamila laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't want the world, Gabriel. I wanted you. The pain in her voice was like a knife to his heart. Gabriel turned to face her fully, seeing tears gathering in her eyes. Did you? Find someone better, I mean. There is no one better, Jamila whispered. There never was. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of lost years settling around them like fog. Gabriel found himself studying her profile in the moonlight, memorizing the elegant line of her neck, the proud set of her shoulders. I wrote you letters, he said suddenly. Hundreds of them. For years. I'd write them and then throw them away, because what was the point? I'd made my choice. I kept your class ring until I was 25, Jamila admitted. Wore it on a chain under my clothes. My fiancé made me get rid of it when we got engaged. What happened? With your engagement? Jamila was quiet for so long Gabriel thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I couldn't do it. 3 days before the wedding, I looked at myself in my dress and realized I was about to promise my life to a man I liked and respected but could never love. Not the way I loved, the way I still loved you. Gabriel's heart clenched at the past tense. Loved? Jamila turned to meet his eyes, and Gabriel saw his own longing reflected there. Love, she corrected softly. Present tense. Always present tense. The confession hung between them like a lit fuse. Gabriel felt every rational thought flee his mind, replaced by a desperate need to touch her, to prove to himself she was real, she was here, she was saying these impossible words. Jamila, he whispered, reaching out to cup her cheek with trembling fingers. She leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward sunlight, her eyes fluttering closed. We can't, she whispered, but she didn't pull away. Why not? Gabriel asked, his thumb tracing the high curve of her cheekbone. Because we're not 18 anymore. Because we have responsibilities, complications. Because last time nearly destroyed me. Gabriel felt her words like physical blows, but he didn't remove his hand. What if we could do it right this time? What if we're finally old enough, wise enough, strong enough? Before Jamila could answer, the distant sound of voices carried across the water. A group of reunion-goers were walking along the creek path, their laughter bright in the night air. Jamila pulled back gently, the spell broken. I should get back, she said, standing and smoothing her dress. People will notice I'm gone. Gabriel stood too, fighting the urge to pull her back into his arms. When can I see you again? Jamila hesitated, clearly torn. I'm helping with the church renovation while I'm in town. Bishop Williams, my father, he's finally letting me redesign the fellowship hall. Your father's the bishop now? Gabriel asked, surprised. For 10 years, Jamila confirmed. He's mellowed with age. Mostly. Gabriel smiled at that. Bishop Clarence Williams had never approved of their teenage romance, viewing Gabriel as a distraction from Jamila's bright future. "Maybe I could help," Gabriel offered. "With the renovation. I do have some experience with construction." Jamila's smile was soft and uncertain. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Please," Gabriel said, and heard the naked desperation in his own voice. "I just got you back. I'm not ready to lose you again so soon." Something in his voice must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. "We start at 8 tomorrow morning." "And Gabriel?" She paused, looking back at him with eyes that held 32 years of carefully banked fire. "This doesn't mean anything beyond friendship. We're different people now. We can't just pick up where we left off." But even as she said the words, Gabriel saw the way her fingers lingered on his arm, felt the electric current that still sparked between them. "Of course," he agreed, though they both knew he was lying. "Just friends." As he watched her walk away, her silhouette gradually swallowed by the darkness, Gabriel felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: hope. Terrifying, irrational, completely impractical hope. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Chapter 2. Gabriel arrived at Millbrook Baptist Church 15 minutes early the next morning, coffee in hand and his heart hammering like he was 17 again, waiting to pick Jamila up for their first real date. The church looked different in daylight, smaller than his memories, the white paint showing its age, but still dignified in its simplicity. He found Jamila in the fellowship hall, already deep in conversation with a contractor about crown molding. She wore jeans and a soft yellow blouse, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and Gabriel thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Gabriel," she said when she noticed him, her voice carefully neutral but her eyes warming despite herself. "You came." "I said I would," Gabriel replied, setting his toolbox down. "What can I do to help?" For the next hour, they fell into an easy rhythm of work and conversation. Gabriel found himself stealing glances at Jamila as she moved around the space, directing contractors with quiet authority, her vision for the renovation becoming clearer with each decision. "You're staring," Jamila said without looking up from her sketches. "Sorry," Gabriel said, not sounding sorry at all. You're amazing at this. You always had an eye for how spaces could be, not just how they were." Jamila glanced up at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Remember when we used to redesign our bedrooms with furniture made of cardboard boxes? And you made me help you paint murals on your closet walls," Gabriel laughed. "Your mother was so angry when she found out." "She got over it when she saw how beautiful they turned out," Jamila said, her smile growing wider. "You were always a better artist than you gave yourself credit for." They worked in comfortable companionship, their conversation flowing as easily as it had in high school. Gabriel found himself relaxing for the first time in years, the constant knot of tension in his shoulders finally beginning to loosen. Around noon, Jamila suggested they break for lunch. They walked to Biscuit Heaven, the little diner that had been their after-school hangout, and settled into a corner booth that felt like coming home. "So tell me about Eleanor," Jamila said after they'd ordered. "What's she like?" Gabriel's expression grew complicated. "She's brilliant. Artistic like her mother, but with a stubborn streak that's pure Smith family. She's been struggling since Helen died. Acting out, skipping school, pushing everyone away. She's grieving," Jamila said gently. "And probably angry that the world kept going when hers stopped." "How do you?" Gabriel started, then stopped, studying her face. There was something in her eyes, a depth of understanding that spoke of personal experience. "I know what it's like to lose someone you love," Jamila said quietly. "The anger is sometimes easier to handle than the pain." Before Gabriel could ask what she meant, the bell over the diner door chimed, and a familiar voice called out his name. "Gabriel Smith, as I live and breathe." Gabriel looked up to see Tommy Richardson approaching their table, his round face split by a grin. Tommy had been Gabriel's best friend in high school, the kind of loyal, steady presence that kept everyone grounded. Bear. Gabriel stood and embraced his old friend, genuinely happy to see him. "How are you, man?" "Can't complain," Tommy said, his eyes shifting curiously to Jamila. "And Miss Jamila Williams. Should have known where I'd find Gabriel." "Hello, Tommy," Jamila said with a warm smile. "How's the garage business?" "Thriving," Tommy replied, settling into the booth across from them without invitation. "2 locations now, and my oldest boy's learning the trade. But enough about me, what's this I hear about you two working together at the church?" Gabriel felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Jamila's renovating the fellowship hall. I'm just helping out." Tommy's knowing grin suggested he wasn't buying that explanation. And I suppose it's just coincidence that Gabriel Smith is suddenly volunteering for manual labor after 32 years away." "It's not like that," Jamila said quickly, but Gabriel caught the faint blush coloring her cheeks. "If you say so," Tommy said with a wink. "But for what it's worth, it's good to see you both. Some things are just meant to be, you know." After Tommy left with promises to catch up properly soon, Gabriel and Jamila walked back to the church in thoughtful silence. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and Gabriel found himself hyper-aware of every time Jamila's arm brushed against his. Back in the fellowship hall, they worked on installing new light fixtures, the task requiring them to work in close proximity. Gabriel held the ladder steady while Jamila climbed up to position the fixtures, and he tried not to notice how the afternoon light caught the gold threads in her dark hair. A little to the left, Jamila called down, adjusting the fixture. Gabriel shifted the ladder slightly, his hands resting on either side of her legs to keep it steady. The innocent contact sent electricity shooting through his nervous system. "How's that?" Jamila asked, looking down at him. Gabriel looked up and felt the world tilt on its axis. She was backlit by the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows, her face soft with concentration, and for a moment they were 18 again, full of dreams and certain their love could conquer anything. "Perfect," Gabriel said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't hide. Jamila's breath caught, and Gabriel saw her pupils dilate slightly. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility and longing. Then the ladder wobbled. Gabriel's hands tightened automatically, and Jamila gasped, losing her grip on the fixture. She swayed backward, and Gabriel reached up instinctively to catch her. Time slowed as Jamila fell into his arms, her body pressed against his chest, her face inches from his own. Gabriel could feel the rapid beat of her heart, could smell the familiar scent of jasmine that clung to her skin. Her lips were parted slightly, her breathing shallow and quick. "I've got you," Gabriel whispered, his arms tightening around her. "Gabriel," Jamila breathed, her hands fisting in his shirt. They stood frozen like that, neither moving away, the tension between them crackling like a live wire. Gabriel's eyes dropped to her lips, and he saw her tongue dart out to wet them nervously. "Dad?" Eleanor's voice cut through the charged air like a blade. Gabriel and Jamila sprang apart so quickly that Jamila stumbled, Gabriel's hands shooting out to steady her again. Eleanor stood in the doorway of the fellowship hall, her dark hair hanging in her face, her expression unreadable. She was tall for 16, with her mother's delicate features and Gabriel's intense eyes. "Eleanor," Gabriel said, his voice higher than usual. "What are you doing here?" "Aunt Sarah said you were helping at the church," Eleanor said, her gaze shifting between Gabriel and Jamila with unsettling perception. "I wanted to see what was so important that you forgot about our lunch plans." Gabriel's stomach dropped. In all the time he'd spent with Jamila, he'd completely forgotten that he'd promised to take Eleanor to lunch and help her pick out paint for her new room. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry," Gabriel started, but Eleanor held up a hand to stop him. "Don't," she said quietly. "Just, don't." She turned to go, and Gabriel started after her, but Jamila caught his arm. "Let me," she said softly. Gabriel wanted to protest, but something in Jamila's eyes stopped him. He watched, heart in his throat, as Jamila approached his daughter. "Eleanor," Jamila said gently. "I'm Jamila Williams. I'm an old friend of your father's." Eleanor turned back, her young face set in lines too hard for her age. "I know who you are. The whole town's talking about Dad's old friend." "I imagine they are," Jamila said with a small smile. "Small towns do love their gossip. But what matters is what you think." Eleanor studied Jamila for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if she was friend or foe. "I think my dad's been different since he came back here," Eleanor said finally. "He actually smiles now. He hasn't smiled, really smiled, since Mom died." Gabriel felt his throat tighten with emotion at his daughter's perceptive words. "Your mother must have been a wonderful woman," Jamila said sincerely. "Your father spoke of her with such respect and love." "She was," Eleanor said, her voice softening slightly. "But she used to say Dad had a sad place in his heart that she could never quite reach. Maybe that's where you used to be." The wisdom in those words, spoken by a grieving 16-year-old, left both adults momentarily speechless. "I don't want to take anything away from your mother's memory," Jamila said carefully. "And I don't want to cause problems between you and your father." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, studying Jamila with eyes that were far too old for her face. "Are you going to hurt him again?" she asked finally. "I hope not," Jamila said honestly. "I never meant to hurt him the first time." Eleanor nodded slowly, seeming to accept this answer. "We were supposed to pick out paint for my room," she said to Gabriel. Maybe Jamila could come with us. If she wants to. She probably knows more about colors than either of us." Gabriel looked between his daughter and the woman he'd never stopped loving, his heart full to bursting. "I'd love to," Jamila said softly. "If that's okay with your father." "More than okay," Gabriel managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Drop a heart emoji if you believe some connections are simply meant to last forever, and share a story about a place that holds special memories for you." The three of them spent the afternoon at the hardware store, debating paint colors and design ideas. Gabriel watched in amazement as Jamila and Eleanor bonded over their shared artistic vision, both of them sketching room layouts on napkins and discussing the psychological effects of different color palettes. "What do you think about this blue?" Eleanor asked, holding up a paint chip. "For an accent wall?" "I love it," Jamila said enthusiastically. "It's sophisticated but still youthful. And it would look beautiful with cream trim and maybe some gold accents." "Yes!" Eleanor exclaimed, her face lighting up with genuine excitement for the first time in months. Gabriel felt his chest tighten with a complex mix of emotions. Watching Jamila with his daughter felt natural, right, like a missing piece clicking into place. But it also highlighted everything he'd lost, everything they'd all lost, when he'd made the choice to leave 32 years ago. That evening, after they'd loaded Eleanor's paint into the car and dropped her off at his sister's house, Gabriel and Jamila found themselves back at the church, ostensibly to clean up their work area but really because neither was ready to say goodbye. "She's an amazing kid," Jamila said as they put away tools. "You should be proud." "I am," Gabriel said. "But I'm also terrified I'm failing her. Since Helen died, I feel like I don't know how to be the parent she needs." "You're doing better than you think," Jamila said softly. "Grief is hard at any age, but especially for teenagers. She needs to know it's okay to be angry, okay to miss her mother, okay to accept happiness when it comes." Gabriel looked at her sharply. "You sound like you speak from experience." Jamila was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling on the paintbrush she was cleaning. "Loss changes you," she said finally. "It teaches you that life is fragile, that love is precious, that second chances are rare gifts." There was something in her voice, a carefully controlled pain that made Gabriel want to pull her into his arms and promise to protect her from any further hurt. "Jamila," he said softly, moving closer. "What happened to you? What loss are you talking about?" For a moment, Gabriel thought she might tell him. Her guard seemed to slip, and he saw the depths of old pain in her eyes. But then she straightened, rebuilding her walls with visible effort. "Everyone has losses, Gabriel. Everyone has scars." Gabriel wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth, but he recognized the signs of someone protecting themselves from further pain. He'd worn the same expression for years after leaving Millbrook. "You're right," he said instead. "But maybe we don't have to carry them alone anymore." Jamila looked up at him then, and Gabriel saw hope and fear warring in her dark eyes. "Is that what this is?" she asked quietly. "A second chance?" Gabriel stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, close enough to count the freckles across her nose that he'd once memorized as a teenager. "I'd like it to be," he said honestly. "If you're willing to try." For a moment, Jamila looked like she might say yes. Her lips parted slightly, her breathing quickened, and Gabriel felt the magnetic pull that had always existed between them drawing them closer. Then she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. "I need time," she said. "This is all happening so fast, and I have things I need to figure out first." Gabriel felt disappointment wash over him, but he forced himself to nod. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." As they locked up the church and walked to their separate cars, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Jamila's hesitation than simple caution. There was a secret she was carrying, something that cast shadows in her eyes whenever she thought he wasn't looking. Whatever it was, Gabriel was determined to prove to her that he could be trusted with it. That this time, he wouldn't run when things got complicated. This time, he would stay and fight for the love that had never really died. Chapter 3. Over the next 2 weeks, Gabriel and Jamila fell into a routine that felt both natural and dangerous. Morning coffee at Biscuit Heaven, where they shared stories and comfortable silences. Days working side by side at the church, their awareness of each other growing stronger with every accidental touch, every shared laugh, every moment when their eyes met across a room. Eleanor joined them most afternoons, and Gabriel watched in wonder as his guarded daughter began to open up under Jamila's gentle influence. It was Jamila who convinced Eleanor to enter a piece in the church's youth art show, Jamila who listened without judgment when Eleanor finally broke down and admitted how angry she was at her mother for dying, how guilty she felt for sometimes forgetting to miss her. "Your mom wouldn't want you to stop living because she can't," Jamila told Eleanor one afternoon as they painted trim in the fellowship hall. "Love doesn't end when someone dies, it just changes form. It becomes the voice in your head that tells you to be brave, to be kind, to grab happiness when it comes your way." Gabriel felt his chest tighten at those words, at the pain underneath them that suggested Jamila spoke from devastating personal experience. That evening, after Eleanor had gone home with his sister, Gabriel and Jamila found themselves alone in the fellowship hall as storm clouds gathered outside. "You're amazing with her," Gabriel said, watching Jamila clean paintbrushes with meticulous care. "She trusts you in a way she hasn't trusted anyone since Helen died." "She's easy to love," Jamila replied, not meeting his eyes. "She reminds me of..." She stopped abruptly, her hands stilling on the brush. "Reminds you of who?" Gabriel pressed gently. Jamila was quiet for so long Gabriel thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Someone I lost." Before Gabriel could ask what she meant, the first rumble of thunder echoed through the building. They both looked toward the windows as rain began pattering against the glass. "Looks like we're stuck for a while," Gabriel said, trying to lighten the suddenly heavy mood. "I should call a cab," Jamila said, reaching for her phone. "In this weather? In Millbrook?" Gabriel laughed. You'd have better luck calling for a unicorn. As if to prove his point, lightning flashed outside, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the building. The lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by the intermittent flashes of lightning. "Great," Jamila muttered, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. Gabriel found a battery-powered lantern in the supply closet, filling the room with warm, golden light. In the soft glow, with rain drumming against the windows and thunder rolling overhead, the fellowship hall felt intimate, almost sacred. "Remember the storm junior year?" Gabriel asked, settling onto the floor beside where Jamila sat. "When we got caught in the old Miller barn?" "I remember," Jamila said softly. "We were supposed to be at the homecoming dance. But you wanted to see the meteor shower instead," Gabriel finished. "We climbed up to the hayloft and watched the sky light up. Until the storm rolled in," Jamila added, a small smile playing at her lips. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, lost in the memory of that night, how they'd held each other in the darkness, whispering dreams and promises, certain their love could conquer anything the world threw at them. "We were so sure, weren't we?" Jamila said finally. "So certain we had it all figured out." "We were kids," Gabriel replied. "Kids who loved each other but didn't know how to fight for it when things got complicated." "Is that what happened? Things just got complicated?" Gabriel turned to look at her, seeing his own regret reflected in her eyes. "I got scared," he admitted. "Scared of responsibility, scared of failing you, scared of becoming my father, trapped in a life that was too small for my dreams. I thought if I left, if I got educated and successful, I could come back and give you everything you deserved. But you never came back." "No," Gabriel said quietly. "I didn't. Because by the time I realized success meant nothing without someone to share it with, I convinced myself you'd moved on. That you deserved better than a man who'd already abandoned you once." "I never moved on," Jamila whispered. "I tried, but I never could." The vulnerability in her voice made Gabriel's heart ache. He reached out tentatively, covering her hand with his. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry for hurting you, for leaving, for being too much of a coward to fight for us." Jamila turned her hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. The simple contact sent warmth racing up Gabriel's arm. "We were both scared," she said. "Both too young to know that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day, especially when things get hard." Gabriel squeezed her hand gently. "What if we're old enough now? Old enough to choose each other, choose to fight for this?" Jamila looked up at him, and in the soft lantern light, Gabriel saw the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. "Gabriel, there are things about my life, about what happened after you left, that you don't know. Things that might change how you feel about." Her words were cut off by a tremendous crash of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The storm had reached its full fury, rain lashing against the windows in sheets. "Whatever it is," Gabriel said firmly, "it doesn't change how I feel about you." "Nothing could." Jamila searched his face as if looking for cracks in his certainty. Finding none, she leaned closer, and Gabriel felt his breath catch. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "Then believe it," Gabriel said, lifting his free hand to cup her cheek. For a moment, they hovered on the edge of something that would change everything. Gabriel could feel Jamila's pulse racing beneath his fingers, could see the way her lips parted slightly as her breathing quickened. The space between them hummed with 32 years of suppressed longing. Then Jamila pulled back abruptly, the spell broken. "We should go," she said, standing quickly and moving toward the window. "The storm's passing." Gabriel wanted to protest, wanted to pull her back and finish what they'd started, but he recognized the fear in her voice. Whatever secret she was carrying was big enough to make her run from the love they both clearly still felt. The ride to Jamila's hotel was quiet, filled with unspoken words and the weight of missed opportunities. When Gabriel pulled up to the entrance, Jamila hesitated before getting out. "Thank you," she said softly. "For today, for understanding, for everything." "Jamila," Gabriel started, but she was already climbing out of the car. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said, then disappeared into the hotel before he could respond. Gabriel sat in the parking lot for a long time, rain drumming on his roof, trying to figure out what was holding Jamila back. He'd meant what he said, nothing could change how he felt about her. But clearly, she didn't believe that. Whatever secret she was carrying, whatever pain she was protecting herself from, Gabriel was determined to prove he could handle it. That this time, he wouldn't run. The next few days passed in a strange dance of intimacy and distance. Gabriel and Jamila continued working together, but there was a new tension between them, awareness of what had almost happened, what they both wanted but were afraid to reach for. It was Eleanor who finally forced the issue. Gabriel came home from the church one evening to find his daughter waiting for him in the living room, her expression serious. "We need to talk," she said, and Gabriel felt his stomach drop at the ominous words. "What's wrong?" he asked, settling beside her on the couch. "It's what's not happening that's the problem," Eleanor said with the exasperated tone only teenagers could master. "You and Jamila are dancing around each other like you're afraid to touch, and it's painful to watch." Gabriel felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Eleanor, that's not really something we should discuss." "Why not?" Eleanor interrupted. "Dad, I'm 16, not 6. I can see how you look at her, how she looks at you. I can see how happy you are when you're with her, how alive you seem for the first time since Mom died." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, struggling with how much to share with his daughter. "It's complicated, sweetheart," he said finally. "Because of Mom?" Eleanor asked gently. Gabriel nodded, surprised by his daughter's perceptiveness. "I loved your mother," he said carefully. "She was a good woman, a wonderful mother, and she deserved better than a husband who could never give her his whole heart. But you never loved her the way you love Jamila," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. Gabriel felt his throat tighten with emotion and old guilt. "No," he admitted quietly. "I didn't. And that's something I have to live with." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then reached out and took his hand. "Dad, Mom knew," she said softly. Gabriel's head snapped up. "What?" "Mom knew you'd loved someone before her. She told me once, when I asked why you sometimes looked so sad. She said your heart had been broken before you met her, and she knew she was helping you heal, not replacing what you'd lost." Gabriel felt tears prick his eyes at his late wife's wisdom and generosity. "She also said," Eleanor continued, "that if something ever happened to her, she hoped you'd find your way back to that first love. Because everyone deserves to know what it feels like to be completely, wholly loved." Gabriel pulled his daughter into his arms, overwhelmed by gratitude for both the women in his life, one who had loved him generously despite his limitations, and one who was wise enough to understand what he needed. "So stop being afraid," Eleanor said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Stop letting guilt and fear keep you from being happy. Mom would want you to choose love, Dad. Choose Jamila." That night, Gabriel lay awake staring at the ceiling, his daughter's words echoing in his mind. She was right, he had been letting fear and guilt hold him back. But Jamila was doing the same thing, protecting herself from something he couldn't see. The next morning, Gabriel arrived at the church early, determined to finally break through whatever wall Jamila had built around her heart. But when he reached the fellowship hall, he found it empty except for a note on the work table. "Gabriel, something's come up with a client in Savannah. I have to leave town for a few days, maybe longer. Thank you for everything. Jamila." Gabriel crumpled the note in his fist, frustration and hurt warring in his chest. She was running again, just like she had 32 years ago when things got too real, too intense. But this time, Gabriel wasn't going to let her go without a fight. Have you ever had to choose between safety and the chance for true love? Share your story about taking risks for your heart. We read every comment and your experiences inspire these stories. Gabriel spent the rest of the day making phone calls, pulling strings, using every connection he had to track Jamila down. By evening, he had an address for her design firm in Savannah and a plan. He was going to drive there in the morning and demand the truth, about why she kept running, about what secret was so terrible she'd rather flee than trust him with it, about whether the love they'd rediscovered was worth fighting for. But when Gabriel woke up the next morning, he found Eleanor missing. His sister called in a panic at 6 a.m. Eleanor's bed hadn't been slept in, her window was open, and there was a note on her pillow, "Gone to think. Don't worry." Gabriel's blood turned to ice. Eleanor had been struggling, but he thought she was getting better. He thought having Jamila in their lives had been helping. Tommy arrived within an hour, organizing a search party of volunteers. They combed the woods around town, checked all of Eleanor's old haunts, called her few friends. Nothing. It was Bishop Williams who finally suggested checking the creek. "That child's been spending a lot of time down there lately," he said quietly. "My Jamila used to go there when she needed to work through her troubles." Gabriel's heart stopped. The creek was where he and Jamila had shared their first kiss, their last goodbye, their reunion just weeks ago. If Eleanor had gone there, if something had happened. He ran through the woods faster than he'd moved in 20 years, crashing through underbrush, following the sound of running water. He found Eleanor sitting on their old bench, very much alive but clearly devastated, her knees drawn up to her chest and tears streaming down her face. "Eleanor." Gabriel gasped, relief flooding through him so intensely he nearly collapsed. She looked up at his approach, her young face ravaged by grief. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm sorry, Dad. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Everything reminds me of Mom, and now Jamila's gone too, and I thought maybe if I came here." Gabriel pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tight as she cried against his shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe, that's all that matters." "Why did she leave?" Eleanor asked, pulling back to look at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Did I do something wrong? Did you?" Gabriel felt his own tears threatening. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? "I don't know, sweetheart," he said honestly. "But I'm going to find out." As Gabriel held his grieving daughter by the creek where his own love story had begun and ended and begun again, he made a decision. Whatever was holding Jamila back, whatever fear or pain was making her run, he was going to find her and fight for their love, not just for himself, but for Eleanor, who needed to see that sometimes, if you're brave enough to fight for it, love wins. That evening, after Eleanor was safely back home and asleep, Gabriel loaded his car and headed for Savannah. It was time to stop letting the past dictate their future. It was time to choose love, no matter how terrifying the choice might be. The drive to Savannah took him through the night, Gabriel's mind spinning with everything that had happened, everything he needed to say. By the time the sun rose over the coastal city, he was pulling up in front of Jamila's design studio, a beautifully restored Victorian building that spoke of success and refinement. But when he tried the door, it was locked. A sign in the window read, "Closed due to family emergency." Gabriel felt his heart sink. Another dead end, another wall between them. He was turning to leave when he heard a familiar voice call his name. "Gabriel? Gabriel Smith?" He turned to see Maya Sinclair approaching, older now but still recognizable as Jamila's best friend from high school. "Maya," Gabriel said, relief flooding through him. "Thank God. I'm looking for Jamila. Is she okay?" There was a sign about a family emergency. Maya studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "She's not here," Maya said finally. "But I know where she is. The question is, are you ready for the truth about why she keeps running from you?" Gabriel felt his stomach clench with apprehension, but he nodded. Whatever it is, I need to know. I love her, Maya. I've always loved her. Maya sighed, then motioned for him to follow her to a small cafe across the street. Then sit down, she said quietly. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything. Gabriel followed her, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Whatever secret Jamila had been protecting, whatever pain she'd been carrying alone, he was finally going to learn the truth. And then, maybe, they could finally stop running from the love that had never really died. Chapter 4. Maya ordered coffee for both of them, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her mug. Gabriel waited, every nerve in his body stretched taut with anticipation and dread. Jamila's not here because she's at Bonaventure Cemetery, Maya said finally. She goes there every year on this date. It's been 16 years now. 16 years since what? Gabriel asked, though something deep in his gut already knew the answer would shatter him. Maya looked up at him with eyes full of old pain and protective fury. Since her daughter died. The words hit Gabriel like a physical blow. The coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the cafe floor with a crash that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Her daughter, Gabriel repeated numbly. Your daughter, Maya corrected quietly. Hope Williams. She would have been 31 this year. Gabriel's world tilted on its axis. The floor seemed to shift beneath his feet as the magnitude of Maya's words crashed over him in waves. That's impossible, he whispered. Jamila was never, she never said. She was 3 months pregnant when you left for college, Maya said, her voice gentle but implacable. She didn't know until after you were gone. Gabriel felt like he was drowning, struggling to process information that rewrote everything he thought he knew about his life. Why didn't she tell me, he gasped. I would have come back. I would have married her, taken care of them both. She knew that, Maya said. That's exactly why she didn't tell you. Gabriel stared at her, uncomprehending. Jamila was 18, pregnant, and terrified, Maya continued. Her father was furious but protective. He wanted to track you down, demand you do right by his daughter. But Jamila, she stopped him. Why? Gabriel's voice broke on the word. Because she loved you too much to trap you. You had a full scholarship, a chance at the life you'd always dreamed of. She convinced herself, and her father, that you deserved your shot at success, that she'd be selfish to tie you down with a baby you never planned for. Gabriel buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd lost, what they'd all lost. What happened to her? To Hope? Maya's voice softened with remembered grief. Jamila moved to Atlanta, finished high school through correspondence courses, had the baby alone. Hope she was beautiful, Gabriel. She had your eyes, your stubborn chin, Jamila's grace. For 16 years, Jamila built her whole world around that little girl. And then? Car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. Hope was coming home from art class, she was talented, like both her parents. She died instantly. Gabriel felt his chest constrict, as if all the air had been sucked from the room. A daughter. He'd had a daughter for 16 years and never known it. And now she was gone, and he'd never get the chance to know her, to love her, to tell her how sorry he was for not being there. Jamila blamed herself, Maya continued. If she'd told you about Hope, if you'd stayed, if she'd made different choices, the guilt nearly destroyed her. She threw herself into work, built her business as a monument to Hope's memory, but she never let herself get close to anyone again. Until now, Gabriel said, understanding finally dawning. Until now, Maya confirmed. Coming home, seeing you again, watching you with Eleanor, it's bringing everything back. All the joy she felt being Hope's mother, all the pain of losing her, all the regret over the choices she made. Gabriel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I have to find her, he said. I have to tell her. Tell her what? Maya asked. That you forgive her? She doesn't want your forgiveness, Gabriel. She wants to know that loving her won't cost you everything again. Gabriel paused, looking back at Maya with desperate eyes. Where exactly in the cemetery? Maya sighed, recognizing the determination in his voice. Section K, Plot 247. But Gabriel, be careful with her heart. She's been broken too many times already. The drive to Bonaventure Cemetery passed in a blur of Spanish moss and ancient oaks. Gabriel's mind reeled with questions he'd never get to ask, conversations he'd never get to have with a daughter he'd never known existed. Hope Williams. His daughter had been named Hope. He found Jamila exactly where Maya said she'd be, kneeling beside a simple granite headstone in the shade of a massive oak tree. She wore a black dress and held a bouquet of white roses, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Gabriel approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When he was close enough to read the headstone, his knees nearly buckled. Hope Jamila Williams' beloved daughter, she brought light wherever she went. Below the inscription was a small engraving of an artist's palette, and somehow that detail, that their daughter had been an artist like them, broke something open in Gabriel's chest. "Hello, sweetheart," Jamila was whispering to the stone. "I brought your favorite roses. White ones, like the ones in Mama's garden when you were little." Gabriel stood frozen, watching the woman he loved grieve the child they'd created together, the child he'd never get to hold or know or love. Tears streamed down his face as the full weight of their loss settled into his bones. "I met someone," Jamila continued softly. "Someone who would have loved you so much. He has a daughter too, Eleanor. She's 16, just like you were when, she's artistic like you were. She would have been your sister, in a way." Gabriel's sob escaped before he could stop it. Jamila spun around, her eyes wide with shock and something like fear. "Gabriel," she breathed. "How did you?" "Maya?" "She told me," Gabriel said, his voice thick with tears. "About Hope. About everything." Jamila's face crumpled, and she turned back toward the headstone as if she could hide from his reaction. "Now you know," she whispered. "Now you understand why I can't, why we can't." Gabriel moved forward and dropped to his knees beside her, his hand covering hers on the roses. "I understand that we lost something precious," he said quietly. "I understand that you carried this alone for 32 years when you should have had help. I understand that our daughter lived and laughed and created beautiful things, and I'll never forgive myself for not being there." Jamila looked at him through her tears, searching his face for condemnation and finding only grief that matched her own. "I thought about telling you," she said brokenly. "So many times, especially when she was little and looked so much like you. But I was scared you'd hate me for keeping her from you, scared you'd try to take her away, scared you'd resent being tied down." "I could never hate you," Gabriel said fiercely. "Never. But I hate that you went through this alone. I hate that I wasn't there when she was born, when she took her first steps, when she said her first word. I hate that I wasn't there to hold you when you lost her." They knelt together in the dappled shade, 32 years of secrets and sorrow flowing between them like a river finally finding the sea. "Tell me about her," Gabriel said softly. "Tell me everything." And Jamila did. She told him about Hope's first smile, how she'd laughed at everything as a baby. How she'd inherited Gabriel's determination and Jamila's artistic eye. How she'd won the state art contest in 8th grade with a painting of their old oak tree, somehow knowing it was important even though Jamila had never told her why. She asked about her father sometimes, Jamila said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I told her you were a good man who didn't know about her, who would have loved her if he'd had the chance." "I would have," Gabriel said with absolute certainty. "I would have loved her so much." "I know," Jamila whispered. "That's what made keeping the secret so hard." They sat in silence for a while, letting 32 years of hidden grief flow between them. Finally, Gabriel spoke. What would she have thought of us? Of this? Jamila managed a small smile through her tears. She would have been insufferably smug about it. She always said I needed someone to make me laugh again, someone to help me remember that life was meant to be lived, not just survived. Gabriel felt his own smile tugging at his lips despite the pain. She sounds wise. She was. Too wise for 16. Jamila's voice broke again. Gabriel, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I robbed you of knowing her, sorry I robbed her of knowing her father, sorry I was too scared and proud to trust you with the truth. Gabriel turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. Look at me, he said gently. When she met his eyes, he continued. We both made choices based on fear. I left because I was scared of failing you. You didn't tell me because you were scared of trapping me. We were kids who thought we were protecting each other, and we ended up hurting each other instead. But the result is the same, Jamila said. Hope grew up without her father, and you never got to know your daughter. That's true, Gabriel acknowledged. And I'll grieve that for the rest of my life. But Jamila, she did have love. She had you, a mother who loved her enough to sacrifice her own happiness to give her daughter's father a chance at his dreams. That's not nothing. That's everything. Jamila's tears came harder now, but they seemed cleaner somehow, like a long-festering wound finally draining. I loved her so much, she sobbed. She was everything good about both of us. Then let's honor her, Gabriel said firmly. Let's honor her by choosing love this time. Let's honor her by being brave enough to build the family we should have had 32 years ago. Jamila looked at him with hope and terror warring in her eyes. What are you saying? Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out something he'd been carrying for 3 days, not a ring, but a key. I'm saying I bought a house in Millbrook. Close enough to Atlanta for my work, perfect for Eleanor to finish high school. I'm saying I love you, not just the memory of who you were, but the amazing woman you've become. I'm saying I want to build a life with you, and I want Eleanor to have the mother she's been missing, even if it's not the one she was born to. Jamila stared at the key through her tears. Gabriel, I don't know if I know how to be part of a family anymore. I've been alone for so long. Then we'll learn together, Gabriel said. All of us. Eleanor needs healing too, and maybe we can help each other. Jamila looked back at Hope's headstone, as if asking her daughter's permission. What would you say, baby girl, she whispered. Would you want Mama to try again? Gabriel swore he felt a warm breeze stir the air around them, rustling the oak leaves overhead in what sounded almost like laughter. Jamila must have felt it too, because she looked back at Gabriel with something like wonder in her eyes. She always said I was too stubborn for my own good, she said softly. Smart girl, Gabriel said, his heart hammering as Jamila's fingers closed around the key. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Gabriel replied. But I'm more scared of losing you again. I'm more scared of living the rest of my life wondering what if. Jamila was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing the key's edges. If we do this, she said finally, we do it right. No more secrets, no more running when things get hard. We choose each other every day, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult, Gabriel agreed. Jamila took a deep breath and nodded. Then yes, she said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I want to try. For Hope, for Eleanor, for us. Gabriel pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight as they knelt beside their daughter's grave. It wasn't the ending either of them had imagined 32 years ago, but it was a beginning, scarred, complicated, built on loss and regret, but real in a way their teenage love had never been. I love you, Gabriel whispered into her hair. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, Jamila whispered back. I always will. As the sun began to set through the Spanish moss, painting everything in golden light, Gabriel and Jamila rose from their daughter's grave hand in hand. They had a drive ahead of them, back to Millbrook, back to Eleanor, back to the life they were going to build together. It wouldn't be easy. There would be grief to work through, trust to rebuild, a teenage daughter to help heal. But for the first time in 32 years, they weren't facing the future alone. As they walked toward Gabriel's car, Jamila stopped and looked back at Hope's headstone one more time. "Thank you, baby girl," she whispered, "for bringing us back together." Gabriel squeezed her hand, and together they walked toward their second chance at love, older, wiser, wounded but healing, ready to choose each other no matter what came next. 1 year later, Gabriel and Jamila stood under their old oak tree, surrounded by family and friends who had always known they belonged together. Eleanor served as Jamila's maid of honor, her young face radiant with joy at seeing her father truly happy for the first time in years. Bishop Williams officiated with tears in his eyes, finally able to give his blessing to the love he'd once tried to prevent. But the most important presence at their wedding wasn't visible, it was Hope, whose memory blessed their union and whose love had taught them both that some connections transcend time, loss, and even death itself. Love doesn't always follow the timeline we expect. Sometimes it plants seeds in teenage hearts that don't bloom until we're wise enough to tend them properly. Gabriel and Jamila learned that true love isn't diminished by time or tragedy, it's deepened, seasoned, made more precious by everything we survive to find it again. Their story reminds us that second chances are sacred gifts, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the greatest courage is simply choosing to open your heart again after it's been broken. Do you believe in second chances at love? Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past and found the connection stronger than before? What would you tell someone afraid to open their heart again after loss? If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who believes in the power of enduring love. Subscribe to Dear Love Diaries for more stories that celebrate the courage it takes to love again. And tell us in the comments, what does your heart believe about second chances? Tomorrow, we'll share another story about love's power to heal, transform, and triumph. Until then, remember, it's never too late to choose love over fear, connection over protection, and hope over past pain. Your heart knows what it needs. Trust it.